episode 81 of my show. I had on the Atomweight Invicta champion, Alicia Zappatella. Here we are. I'm on episode 82, and we're shifting gears a little bit. We are going to look at one of the most exciting strawweight prospects in the country, as far as I'm concerned. Her name is Mia Grawe. She trains out of the War Training Center in Houston, Texas. Miss Mia Grawe, how are you doing on this fantastic January afternoon?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I am really excited to make your acquaintance, and I really enjoyed doing a whole bunch of homework on you. I've watched all your fights. You are so insanely talented and so incredibly gifted, and you're at the War Training Center, which is like one of my favorite gyms because I've had on a couple of your teammates on my show, and I'm incredibly excited about like Josh Walker.
Mhm.
I'm super excited about him. I'm super excited about Santiago Guzman. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about your gym specifically? Can you talk to me a little bit about Coach Copley? Like, what is it about the War Training Center? How did you get there? And what is your gym like for people who are on the outside?
I got there I believe it was October of 2019. So it was probably around like 8 or 9 months into me just starting MMA. Before that, I was like jumping around different gyms in Houston, trying different coaches, see what I liked. I had a vision from the very beginning that like I wanted to fight. I wanted to make my amateur debut, get that out the way, go pro. Like that was already in my head from the very beginning. So yeah, it was just a process of like finding the right place to call home. I've heard a few things about war like here and there, but I never really like tried it out. um, I knew Karan Reed from high school, and I knew that he trained there at war, so I talked to him about it for a little bit, and then eventually, yeah, I just made my way over there, and it was the best decision I ever made, honestly. It's a great gym, great coaches, great team, so much access to high level everything, high level boxing, high level wrestling, jujitsu, like taekwondo. So yeah.
That's really incredible. And what's really interesting about your gym in particular, like it doesn't really get I don't think all the limelight is on your gym as much as it probably should be. Your gym does very well against the other gyms that you guys go up against. Some gyms in Houston that are way bigger than yours, and you guys do really well. I think you guys are starting to really build something special there, and I'm really excited to see where you all are going to be in a few years' time. It's super exciting. Can you talk to me a little bit about Coach Copley? I've had the pleasure of chatting with him a little bit back and forth. A really interesting guy. A really incredibly knowledgeable person. How has his coaching style
Mhm.
rubbed off on you? How has it propelled you and made you like the killer that you are?
Yeah, he's a great coach, awesome coach. He's so dedicated and passionate and like very invested in all his fighters, which is awesome. He's influenced me so much. I mean, like I have leveled up so much working with Adam Copley. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I would say that when I first came to war, we weren't as tight as we are now, but like the more that I got the ball rolling and I like really like was in it fighting back to back, we started to really like build this bond. I see him like almost every day. We train almost every day. He's keeping me sharp, and we just keep adding more and more to the arsenal. And he keeps evolving as a coach as well as I keep evolving as a fighter. So
He has definitely alluded to that. I think that's critically important. You have to, I can only imagine, like, as a fighter to an extent, you have to adapt to your coach, and then the coach has to also adapt to the fighter. So you kind of gotta like make something work and build something unique. Every
yeah.
fighter's different, and I think that relationship has to
Mm-hmm.
be a little bit
That's the
different as
great
well.
thing about both. Yeah, for sure. That's the great thing about both my coaches, Adam and Jeremy. They both are very they they treat every fighter different because every fighter is different. Every fighter has a different style and different goals and different things to work on. So everything is unique, everything is different. I know like Adam, he has like notebooks of information about all of his fighters. I really admire him as a coach. It's really great.
he I'm a pretty big nerd about all things MMA. I watch countless fights, and
Yeah.
I don't know, like that man has an encyclopedic like knowledge of fighting. Like I could name any fighter, any fight. He's
Hmm.
seen it, and he could just start rattling stuff off to me. It's just it's insane that he has the
Yeah.
time to be that well versed on what's going on in the MMA universe, because I can only imagine how much of his time is dedicated just with you guys. Mia, I wanted to ask, just kind of like expanding on your relationship with Adam. I'm really curious, like in terms of like the fighter dynamic, like in between rounds in particular. We talked about how every coach has to kind of have a different relationship with their fighters. Some fighters, they respond a certain way
Hmm.
in between rounds in terms of making adjustments and following the coach's instructions, doing what Adam wants you to do. When you are in the corner in between rounds, what's kind of the dialogue that he has for you? Like, what is it that he's telling you? Um, can you kind of explain kind of what that process is like?
I feel like every fight has been a little bit different. Mostly, the biggest thing for me, at least, is I get really amped up when I'm fighting. Obviously, it's a pretty intense thing to do. So in between rounds, I think they always make sure, just take those three deep breaths. I've always get told every time I go back to the corner before anything. Okay, first take three deep breaths, and then really how it depends on how my round went. I feel like usually I've done pretty well, and they just are like, "Yeah, you're doing great. Stick to the game plan. Mix it up, change levels, just different pointers." I like that they keep it very calm. I don't want to be too chaotic in the mind. I feel like that time to rest is to really just like reset, relax. I think a big factor in my game is being as relaxed as possible. So they help me with that a lot.
When you are inside the cage and you're fighting, can you hear him? Because some fighters can are like trained; they can hear their coach at all
I can
times.
hear him. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I've definitely become attuned to Adam and Jeremy's voice. I can definitely hear them in the cage, whatever they're saying.
One
He loses his voice almost every fight. After a fight card, his voice is gone.
Right, because I'm sure he's like screaming out instructions what he wants to see, and if he's got three or four of his fighters
Hmm.
going on the same card, I mean, definitely a lot of lemon tea for sure. Um, when he's giving you instructions, like, can you talk a little bit like how are you able to make that work? Like, I've always just kind of wanted to know, like, how are you able? Like, yes, you hear something, but like when you're actually like competing against somebody, some other girl's trying to like knock your face off, how are you able to like stay calm in the moment, hear what he's saying, and not get murked at the same time? That's got to be way easier said than done.
Yeah, definitely easier said than done. I mean, I practice a lot. I train a lot. I think a lot of that experience and just getting used to that has been in the training room, on the mats, sparring. We always find like good rounds, whether we have to like bring girls in from other gyms, maybe, or I mean, I have great teammates at War. But when I'm preparing for a fight, we always make sure that we get those hard rounds, and there he'll corner me and he'll tell me things, and those are my practice rounds. That's when I'm trying my best to stay calm, absorb that information, and execute it while fighting.
You don't look nervous at all to me. In all, that it might be a different story, but like when I see you compete, when I see you fight, you look very calm. Like you look very like you don't look rattled at all. Like I watched your debut fight. At no point in the ring when the camera was on you did you ever really. It looked like you've done it a million times before. When you were getting ready to make your walk for the very first time, I know it's not always like that. I know behind the scenes there are like nerves that come in. Some girls barf beforehand. It's a nerve wracking element. You're making the walk for the first time, and some fighters have talked about it being like an out of body experience. Other fighters are just kind of like, it was just kind of a blur. I don't really remember a whole lot about it. It wasn't that long that you made your pro debut. What was the prep in the locker room? What was that like? And what was making that walk for the first time like? What was that experience for you?
in the walk every time, regardless. My last 4 fights is always a very surreal moment. It is. I'm really big on meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So I probably don't seem too nervous walking out, but there is a bunch of, emotions going through me. I've been training extremely hard, busting my ass like 8 to 6 weeks. And it all leads up to that very moment, and it's a lot to think about. I'm there and I'm in it and I'm ready to go. So at that point, it's just like, there's not much more to think about, let's just get it. I got to just, clear my mind, take those deep breaths. I think I prep for my fights by meditating a lot of the time. Like if you see me in the locker rooms or in the back hours before my fight, after the rule meeting, I'm meditating. I'm in there, I'm just zoned out. I'm not really talking to anybody, I'm just quiet, taking deep breaths. And then, of course, like before the fight, like 30 minutes before the fight, I'll start to warm up, hit mitts with Adam. But it's a very, very chill moment for me, very zen meditative moment for me. I feel like if I were to treat it any other way, I'd be a bit too chaotic.
Sure.
I could be.
I always ask that question because I don't think there's a right answer. I think it's one of those things where it's like you have to do what works for you. So if that's something that works for you, then why change anything up? Some people
Yeah.
take a totally different route and they're listening to like heavy metal, they're flipping
Right.
out, they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But hey, if that's what gets them to respond and get them to rise to the occasion, there's nothing wrong with that. And I just think it's
Yeah.
really interesting to hear what works for different fighters. And I want to kind of like talk a little bit about 2021 for you. It was a phenomenal year for you. I thought you did excellent. And the girls, the caliber of opponents that you fought, these girls they're killers. You fought a bronze medalist and you were able to beat her convincingly. I thought that was a very, very impressive win. But before we get in the weeds on that fight, I just wanted to ask you, Mia, like, what was your high point of 2021 and what was your low point of 2021?
That's a good question. I think my highest point, I guess, I felt very good beating the bronze Olympian gold medalist or bronze medalist Charlotte Craig. That was a really good win for me. I really worked my ass off for that fight. So it felt really good just going in there and being able to do what I planned on doing, what I envisioned doing. Lowest was definitely right after I lost my second fight. That was a pretty low moment for me. But at the same time, I'm extremely grateful for that moment because it definitely propelled me in the right direction. Um, it was humbling. And I definitely was like able to, reflect on myself as a fighter and who I might have thought I was at the moment and coming to the realization that there's so much to learn, like I'm still just a newborn baby in this game. So yeah, I'm actually very grateful for that loss. And I feel like if it wasn't for that loss, I probably wouldn't be leveling up the way I am today.
One of the things that I'm glad you lost too, and I'll explain why. Um, it's tough to not get too fully. It's tough to stay humble and it's tough to learn new things when you're killing it and crushing everybody. If you kill and crush everybody, you always see that point in time, particularly in the AMI level. You'll see somebody who's like 7-0 in the AMIs, right? And they're crushing everybody. Then they get in the pros and all of a sudden they find themselves in the hole 3 fights.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's when it really starts
Mm-hmm.
counting. And they're just, for the very first time, they're encountering adversity. They're figuring out what it's like to lose. And then you see all kinds of crazy stuff happen. You see them jumping gyms. You see them getting new coaches, all kinds of craziness. And their career's almost over before it started because they've never encountered adversity before. You take a tough loss. This is probably the toughest loss I
Mm-hmm.
think somebody could take outside of just getting robbed or a bad split decision not going your way. I think this one's worse because I had you winning this fight. You were a minute 30 away from punching your ticket to another win. For people who haven't seen your fight against Jamie Jefferson, can you kind of break down the fight? Where did things go wrong? and what happened for people who have not seen that fight?
Well, for one, a big thing that I learned in that fight was that I I did not have enough defense for sure. I'm a very I guess like if you look at me, that's my build. You know, I'm a 115 strawweight fighter. People wouldn't really expect me to hit that hard, but I'm a banger. Like I have heavy hands. You know. In the beginning of my career, my debut, and going into this fight with Jamie Jefferson, I almost feel like I felt like that could like carry me, you know, and I felt like,
Sure.
oh, I'm gonna just go in there, I'm gonna just beat her up, knock her out, you know, and I definitely learned that I was lacking in my defense. Um, but other than that, it was going good, you know. I think I was also a bit too aggressive in that fight. Um, very aggressive, and it was working. It was working for I think 3 rounds of the fight. I think I was getting the better of the exchanges. I was beating her in the grappling. I had the cage control. It was all working really well, but I think that I was just not in the right state of mind. I was seeing too much red, you know, and
Did
I think she I guess her experience.
I was gonna say, it's funny that you mentioned it because at that there's a point I'm trying to recall which round it was in. The point deduction I think happened in round two. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. After that deduction
Yes, round
happened,
two.
after that happened, did that make you see red even more?
It honestly kind of knocked me off my game. It kind of like
Yeah,
shook me, startled me a little bit. I was definitely a bit in my head after
sure.
that happened. It was more like I was kind of on the edge. Now I didn't really know if that was my round or not anymore. Like
Right.
I really had to finish strong. So yeah, maybe it did. I did see a little bit more red afterwards because I was just like, man, like I gotta do what I gotta do. Like I gotta win this round. I gotta, beat her up.
Right, because looking at it objectively, you clearly won the first round. There's no doubt about it. That was a 10-9 for you in the first round. The second round, you were winning. You were. They take a point away. So then it's like, okay,
Mhm.
hopefully it's 9 apiece, but you just don't know. You just don't know. So worst case scenario, you're entering the third
Yeah.
with a tied fight.
Right.
In a tied fight, worst case scenario. So it's just kind of one of those
Right.
things with that only being your second fight. Like, man, how do I like not let that get to me? How do I like keep my cool? After the deduction happened, you go and you sit down on the stool at the end of the second. What did Adam tell you? Like, did that even get brought up, or did he just kind of tell you to keep doing your thing, or do you not even remember?
I remember faintly. I don't remember word for word, but I remember it being mentioned. And I remember them talking about how since that point was reducted, it's definitely a very close fight now. And in order to win, you either got to finish her or, really wrap it up this round. So yeah, I went into the third round like I got to finish her, and that was my intention. I was trying to take her down, ground and pound her, and she capitalized on that.
Mia, you have now, like looking back at everything, you have a 3-1 record. So you have 4 fights under your belt.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look back at like all of this,
Yes.
I kind of wanted to like ask you your opinion on scoring, particularly open scoring. Now that you've had a handful of fights under your belt, is that something you're an advocate of, or is it just something you don't even really think too much about? I'm just curious from your perspective as a fighter, your thoughts on the scoring system in MMA.
It's difficult. It's a difficult topic because every judge scores differently.
Right.
They view the fight differently. I was having a conversation with a few teammates the other day about like how a round would go, say if the first minute you're teeing off on the person, they're not touching you, you're just teeing off, lighting them up, striking, very crisp, and you're winning, and then this person takes you down and holds you for the rest of the round. How would you judge that round? I think it's all just like it's difficult. It's a very difficult subject.
I know exactly what you're
Um,
alluding to because to answer your question for me, if I were a judge, here's what I would look for. I don't believe in giving somebody a round based off ground control alone. What are you doing? That's great that they're down on the ground and you're in their full guard. Okay,
Right.
cool. But what are you doing with that? Are you posturing up? Are you smacking them with your elbow?
Right.
Are you punching them? Are
Exactly.
you going for subs? Or are you laying
Yeah.
there? If you're laying there,
You're just laying there
you're just
holding
laying
them,
there. It's
you know?
it's like clinching in
But
boxing almost, in my
some
opinion.
judges will see that as like, right, right. And so, but some judges will see that as like, oh, you won the round, you had ground control. And I don't see it that way. I think fights should be judged mostly off of damage. I that's what I believe. Most, control, if you're controlling your opponent, you should also be looking to either finish them, strike, just inflict damage. I think that's the best way to judge a fight.
Yeah, to me, like, yes, position is important, but it's not the be all end all. If somebody's fighting off their back and if they're being active, if they're if they're doing like a Nate Diaz job, fighting somebody off their back, going for subs, being very, very active, throwing elbows
Mm-hmm.
at somebody's face when they're on the ground, and if the other person's just laying on top of them, then I'm going to give it to the
Yeah.
guy on the back or on the ground. I'm going to give it to him fighting off
Right.
his back. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing. There are a lot of people that I'm going to go ahead and say most of the fighters I talk to, I think there's a tendency most people would like to see an open scoring system at some point down the road. But, you can
Mm.
wish in one hand and then,
I
well,
also think though, like with open scoring, you mean by open scoring, like the fighters being able to know what their round was like? Is that what you mean?
yes.
Right. I think also though that might like cause for like boring fights. I think that edge of like having the fighters not know exactly where they're at will give you a more exciting fight. If there's a fighter that's like up 2 rounds, then they're just gonna go in the third round and dance around, you know? So
I think a good
I don't know.
compromise.
I don't know. I feel like entertainment wise, I feel like it's more entertaining to not have open scoring. And yeah, that's my opinion.
I think a good compromise for me anyway would be your coaches know what the scores are, and then it's on them if they decide to tell you or not. I think I'd be okay with that. Like, let the coach
Yeah.
decide.
Okay, smart.
Yeah, I think it's a good
That's
compromise
true.
because I don't know if I'd necessarily. It would depend on my fighter. Like imagining myself in the role of a coach. It would just depend on who my fighter is. I may not tell my fighter if they're up 2 rounds that they're
Right.
gonna win, or I might. It just kind of depends on what level they're at, their personality, their fighting style. Yeah, I may not necessarily tell them that. So I think that's a really good
Yeah, that
compromise.
would be a good compromise. Mhm.
Tell me a little bit,
Yeah.
Mia, about when you look back at 2021 and just like your fights cumulatively. What is like your biggest takeaway? Like, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned since you started all this? Like, you're so young, you're so brand new into the game, but like I see somebody who's very special and somebody who is loaded with talent and is somebody that I know I'm going to see at the next level in mixed martial arts. It's just one of those things where you have to put your time in. So for anyone who's like looking to make their amateur debut, and whether they're a 15er like you, whether they're a 25 or whatever the case may be, what is something that you would tell a gal getting started in 2022? What is some piece of advice you would give a an amateur mixed martial artist?
I've learned a lot from mixed martial arts. I think the biggest thing is you definitely, if you want to be a mixed martial artist, if you want to, build a profession and a career out of MMA, you have to be deeply in love with it because it's hard work, very hard work, and a lot of sacrifice, a lot of discipline. You're not going to be able to go out to parties and drink and hang out with your friends and bullshit. Like, if this is what you want and if you really want to make it, you got to like sacrifice a bunch. So that's a big thing. I also think I've learned that It's fun and it's exciting, and I love to compete and I love to put on shows for everybody, whether it's MMA, jiu-jitsu, whatever I'm doing. But at the end of the day, like, this is really is very, very personal to me, and it's very deep, you know, like a lot of what I'm doing in martial arts, it's mental and it's spiritual as much as it is physical. And it's really about like trying your hardest or trying your best to be the best version of yourself as a person. You know, if you're um you just have to, you really have to apply that discipline in every aspect of your life. That's my advice.
I think there are a lot of people out there. Um, we live in the age of social media, right? Where likes and follows and all that other crap is like
Mm-hmm.
really important to a lot of people, and I understand why. I and then
Yeah.
in fighting, it's very important, right? It's a marketing tool. You need to get people interested in you, and what ends up happening is other people see that, and now all of a sudden, like, oh wow, like I want to fight, that sounds really cool. But you hit on some things that I think a lot of people don't really think about. That 9 minutes that you're in there for, that's just what we see on the outside looking in, right? I buy my ticket, I show up, I drink a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of beers, eat some hot dogs, and I watch you fight, and and then I go home and I get on with the rest of my day and I forget about it. What I didn't see were the hundreds of hours that you've been putting into this for 9 minutes. That's what I don't see. I don't see the weight cut. I don't see
Right.
the missed social
Mm-hmm.
functions. I don't see all the things that you've had to give up in order to get punched in the face. Right? Like, there's so many things that you're giving up in order to do
Yeah.
this, and what's insane is you're not getting
Mm-hmm.
paid for it. You're an amateur. You're not getting paid for any of this. And you're going through this
Yeah.
process. And for people who don't fight, when they reflect and they think back on that, it's just like, that's crazy. Like, why are you doing this? Like, but you keyed in on something. It's something
Yeah.
that's personal for you. Do you feel like when you're looking
Mm-hmm.
back at 2021, your first year in mixed martial arts, are you a better woman today as a result of everything that you've experienced, or do you mostly feel like the same person?
I don't know, man. I feel like I've grown so much. I mean, I think a camp is really like this place of growth. Like every camp I've changed as a person, and I've had to battle my own emotions and my own thoughts and my own self-doubts and all of those things. Those things never, like, at least in the year that I've done MMA and these fights that I've had, those things never really like go away. They're
Mm-hmm.
always going to be there and you're always going to have to handle them. And so yeah, like over time, I think I've literally, and it's really cool, I think I've watched myself grow through every fight. I've actually gotten a bit emotional, especially after my Charlotte Craig fight. I felt like even just watching it back, it's just like it's a different person, and I really love that about the sport. Like it it makes you very uncomfortable. I put myself in very uncomfortable positions in order to grow to my maximum potential. So I don't feel like the same person I was in 2020 or 2021. I feel like I've definitely grown a lot.
I just think that's so I just think that's so cool, and that's why anybody, I don't care if you're 0 and 100 or 100 and 0, it doesn't matter to me. Like, if you take this seriously and you're putting in the effort, you're putting in the time, you're doing all the right things in order to compete at this level. Anyone who steps in that cage has my respect. You're doing something that a microfraction of the population can do. Um, like, this is not a sport for everybody. This isn't like soccer. This isn't baseball where everyone at one point in their life can say that they've done it. Mixed martial arts is not like that. You're either built for this or you're not. And I think most people look at it, and you're going to get found out real quick. Like, if you're, go through a fight camp and fight once, and then after that first fight, it's like, okay, we want to fight again. And it's like, oh man, like I lost my first fight, and I don't want to do that again. And they go back to playing Call of Duty, and that's it. And that's kind of sad to see, but it
Yeah.
happens all the time.
Yeah, after I lost my second fight to Jamie Jefferson, that was one of my biggest battles. I was definitely heartbroken, and I think with with that came a little bit of like, I don't know, maybe self-esteem issues, maybe like a bit of like, is this really for me, you know?
Right.
um yeah, those were thoughts that crossed my mind, but I I I fought them, I battled them, I overcame them. I did a lot of self-reflection and just learned, you know, like as much as I love winning, winning is amazing. It's the best feeling in the world. It's really not about winning. And
Right.
that's what I've really learned. It's not. It's a deeper journey within.
I think it's absolutely fascinating. When you look at 2022, this upcoming year, I know I alluded to it previously. You wanted to fight in November. The fight doesn't work out. It ends up getting canceled. I know the idea, or the goal at least,
Yeah.
was to get that fourth win at the end of 2021. You don't get that opportunity. So what are you kind of looking at in terms of like 2022? Do you have an idea of like how many fights that you want to have? Is there somebody in particular that you want to fight? How does that all work? What is it that you'd like to get at out of 2022?
I want to just compete more and more. Hopefully it just depends on how the year goes. I'm pretty much like on standby as of right now. The fight in November did fall through, and then I was supposed to fight in January here in Houston for the 115 amateur title with Fury. That didn't end up happening. And I'm currently just waiting to hear back from a few other promotions that are possibly looking for an opponent for me. It's just been really difficult for whatever reason. I'm not sure if it's COVID, the holidays, not a lot of competitors at strawweight. I don't know what it is, but I've been having a lot of difficulty finding an opponent, but I'm ready to get in there and fight again whenever. So if you know anybody, let me know. I'm looking for a fight. I want to fight for a belt. I think I probably thinking like maybe 3 more amateur fights, and I really want to go pro. I'm really excited about that. Just resetting, restarting, being able to use some elbows. You know, that'll
I
be fun.
I bet you're itching to do
Other than
that.
MMA, I want to compete in every art this year. Actually, oh yeah, man, I'm so excited. I feel like that's going to be a big part of my game. I've actually been working on some elbows with a Copley recently. Um, Other than MMA, I did talk to my coaches, and I do want to do different arts also throughout the year. I'm looking to do some boxing matches, amateur boxing, do some Muay Thai would be really fun, and Jiu-Jitsu, of course. I always like to stay active in Jiu-Jitsu.
Well, that is
I actually have a match for March at Subs on the Shore. It should be here in Houston, Texas, pretty soon. Blue belt no gi super fight.
all right. Well, that sounds super cool. Is there going to be a pay-per-view for that?
I'm not sure. I'll let you know, but I don't know right now.
So, by the time you're watching this, if the answer is yes, it'll be in the description of this video. Mia, like, you are such a cool person, um, and an amazing talent. And, like, one of the things that I really liked about you is just kind of like how chill, well spoken you are, and how humble that you are. Not everybody who is as skilled and as young as you is as laid back as you. I've heard some wild stuff before. I'm not going to name names, but it seems like you have a really good head on your shoulders, and you're the type of person that I have a daughter who's 14, and if she was ever interested in like competing or something like that one day, like I would want her to look at gals like you that have a good head on their shoulders and are good advocates for women's mixed martial arts. It's super important, and I'm glad that you're one of the up and coming talents on the scene. I think that's super important. Mia, I want to give you the last word. I know that you have a lot of people at your gym and a lot of people that you work with. So if you have anyone that you'd like to shout out or anything like that, I want you to go ahead and do that.
Okay, I'd like to thank you, Tyler. Thank you for having me on the show. It was great. Shout out to my whole team. I love you guys, all of you, everybody at War Training Center, everybody that contributes to my growth. We are all collectively growing, and 2022 should be a great year for the gym, for my coaches, for my teammates. We're all really putting in the work, and we're all trying our best to be the best versions of ourselves. That's what I love about our gym, honestly. Like everyone there is great people, all pushing each other, no egos. So shout out to you guys. Shout out to Adam Copley, Jeremy Mahon, all my coaches. Yeah, that's all. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, Mia, looking forward to running it back with you. You're amazing, and I look forward to us doing this again one day.